All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the TEA LEA webinar. Um, Today we have quite a full agenda for you, and this is the first time that we are running the slide deck presentation. So I just kind of want to show everyone where both the agenda and the slide deck can be found. You'll come to our special education page, and you kind of scroll down to our webinars. You can find each month we'll have one webinar as opposed to two in previous years. And these webinars will be held mostly on Tuesdays from 2 p.m. to 3:30. Apologize, I'm not sharing.
There we go.
There
Are
we
you
go.
going to share your screen? There you go. It's showing.
Thank, thank you. Yeah, so every month we'll have both an agenda and a presentation deck. Um, Today, before we get into today's presentation, just want to, we have on our panel here uh, our grantees from ESE 15, both Pam Mirabro and Jan Page. And, sure. Apologize, my share screen is, let's stop sharing for one moment. Just pull up what I'm trying. Okay, we just want to take this opportunity to kind of showcase a new part of our Texas SPED support website. This is a new tab right here named Opportunities. Here you will find all sorts of professional opportunities. We want to focus in on our grants today, specifically the Special Education Small and Rural Schools Evaluation Certification Reimbursement Program. I'm going to hand it off to Pam Euroborough.
All right, thanks, Charlie. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with this program, we have teamed up with TEA. We are the Special Education Small and Rural Schools, and we've teamed up with TEA to provide funding with the objective to recruit evaluation staff. So we are looking to recruit diagnosticians and LSSPs in our small and rural schools. So just a little bit about eligibility. For those that want to apply for the program, they must currently be working in one of our small and rural schools or a school that's part of an SSA and be currently enrolled in a program to become a diagnostician or an LSSP. We have a couple of application windows coming up this year. Our next one is October the 1st through the 14th. And then we have a spring window, which is April the 1st through the 14th. So Charlie just took us to our website where you can find more information. And thanks, Charlie. If you go a little bit up, there are a couple of links that have all of our schools that are eligible under small and rural, and also our SSA. So those links are there for you to go if you are not sure if you are currently working in one of those eligible districts. You can always click on one of those links, or if you have any questions, you can always email Jam or myself. And this is where you can find the flyer where Charlie had just shown us. And also we have an application link. So for the application link, that will not actually go live until we are in our window. So if you click on that on October the 1st, it will actually take you to the application.
Thanks, Pam.
And you're welcome.
So I'm seeing that we have over 135 participants on this call today. Hopefully, many of you have some colleagues or you yourself may be currently enrolled in a speech language pathology program or looking to get your licensed psychologist certification. If you know of anyone, please help them spread the word, because this may be an opportunity for them to have some of those costs reimbursed as long as they meet the current criteria that you see posted there and commit to serving in a small and rural area for 3 years after. We've really gained a lot of traction with this program over the last 3 years and are finding that it's really met a need that our small and rural districts have in regards to filling those positions in those different places across the state. So thank you, Jam and Pam, for that information.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Dana. And if you don't mind me jumping on for one more minute, I did forget to mention the 3-year commitment. If you accept funding for this reimbursement program, you will sign a contract with us to serve in a small and rural school for at least 3 years upon completion of your program. But also, I'm glad that Dana mentioned that, because we are about to have one of our largest application window openings that we've had in a while, because we've had so many graduate. We currently have around 250 in the program. In the spring and summer, we had a very large class graduate. So we're looking to accept anywhere between 40 and 50 new participants. So it's a great time to apply. So please help us spread the word. We want to make sure and fill those spots. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Jam and Pam, and thank you, Dana. I'll just say that this is a very unique program, and that you can be in any stage of your program and join this. So you don't have to be just starting out and applying. You could already be in one of these school psychologist or diagnostic programs and be on your second or third year, or any semester in between, and still apply for that reimbursement. So look out for more information in our SPED newsletter coming out about that, or feel free to contact Jan and Pam here at ESE 15. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for one moment and get us set up into our new deck. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlie. Hi, I am Lindsay Crumrine. I'm the Complex Needs Coordinator in the Special Education Technical Assistance Division. I'm joining you today to share a recently published resource called Connecting to Community Support. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background information on the next slide. So House Bill 1188 was passed during the 89th legislative session, and section 29.030 was added to the Texas Education Code. Here's what it says. At the first Individualized Education Program Committee meeting, during which a student's individualized education program is developed under section 29.005, a school district shall provide parent or legal guardian of a student who has an intellectual disability or a developmental delay with information about services and public benefits provided by the local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authority, or LIDA, that serves the county in which the student resides, including services under waiver programs established under Section 1915C of the Social Security Act in the section that you see on your screen. The new code goes on to state that the agency, in collaboration with Health and Human Services Commission, shall develop informational materials that include the information described in what we've already read, and make those materials available for use by school districts. So that brings us back to this new resource on the next slide that now resides on the Texas SPED Support website. So to share this required information at the first admission review and dismissal ARD committee meeting, when the IEP is initially developed for a student with an intellectual disability or developmental delay, each local education agency will use this Connecting to Community Supports resource to ensure that families are provided with information about their LIDA. Connecting to Community Supports is currently published in English and Spanish, and soon will also be available in more than 30 languages. These additional translations will be published to this landing page as well. As a reminder, please be sure to personalize this resource by adding local contact information in the appropriate fields before you provide a copy to the family of an eligible student. So we're going to take a brief look through this resource. On the next slide, you'll see first that because each LEA may disseminate information differently, paper copies, digital copies, etc. We aim to make this resource accessible regardless of how it's provided to families. So you'll notice that there are both hyperlinks and QR codes located throughout the document. The very first QR code under the title will take the reader directly to the digital version on the Texas SPED Support website so that they can access any of the clickable links if they are provided with a paper copy at the yard. So there's also a fillable section on this page where each district or campus will identify a contact person for the parent to reach out to for additional information and or for assistance with accessing any of these linked materials within the document. To determine the appropriate staff to assign, think about roles that may already be familiar with community resources or needs of the families, like your parent liaisons, your transition and employment designee, maybe a special education director or administrator. It could also be a school counselor, a case manager, ARD facilitator, etc. Whomever you choose, please make sure that that staff member is aware so that they can be prepared to field questions from your families. The remainder of this page provides the reader with the definition of a LEA and an overview of their range of services, noting that some services vary depending on location. On page 2, on the next slide, families will be provided with a description of Medicaid waiver programs, along with links to specific programs and even a quick look at the ages that are served through each. The interest lists are explained here on the right side, and a list of tips are provided to the reader, most notably to put their child's name on an interest list for Medicaid waiver programs as soon as a disability is identified. And then on the last page, this lays out the steps that families can take to connect with their LEA and also identify some questions that they might want to consider bringing up when they meet with their LEA. These questions are meant to be a starting point for families that may hesitate to reach out because they aren't quite sure how to start the conversation. There are most definitely many more questions that may be asked during these initial meetings. And then on the right side of the page, you're going to find, oops, go back one more, sorry. On the right hand, you're going to find another customizable section where each district or campus will input the contact information for the LEA located in the county where the eligible student resides. So keep in mind that some districts and SSAs serve students that reside in multiple counties. So double check that the information you're placing in this section is relevant for the family that you're sharing the resources with. You can use the HHSC link or QR code that's located at the bottom of this section to find the LEA for the county or counties that you serve. And then finally, at the bottom of this page, you're going to find additional related resources. It's not required that families access this information in this resource section at the time that this document's provided, but these websites may provide them with helpful information as they navigate their way through their child's journey. While there's no expectation of going back to ARD, if you've already held a student's initial eligibility meeting prior to this document being published, it would still be a good idea to provide this document to the family outside of an ARD committee meeting now that it's available. If you have any questions about this resource, please reach out and we'll get answers back to you as soon as we can. And I think now I will hand it over to Elizabeth, my teammate, who has some graduation and transition resource updates.
Thank you so much. And I am going to be sharing one more new resource as well as a couple of updated resources. And so we're going to start with the Graduation and Special Education Frequently Asked Questions, or FAQ. You can find the link to the graduation FAQ in the webinar agenda or by searching graduation on the Texas SPED Support website. And this FAQ was published on Texas SPED Support in July of 2025, so this summer. And the FAQ captures guidance from a variety of sources and was designed to clarify common questions related to several topics. And you see those topics listed on your screen: the rule overview, curriculum and assessment, dismissal or revocation of consent for special education services, considerations for the conditions included in 19 Texas Administrative Code, Section 89-1070B3, commencement ceremonies and returning to request additional services beyond graduation, summary of performance and evaluation, and TSDS PEIMS coding considerations. So for this webinar, I will review a few of the questions and answers included in this FAQ so that you can get a sense of what's included. So we will start with question 1.2 in the rule overview section. And this asks about the most recent revision to 19 TAC section 891070. And notice that amendments to this rule were adopted in November of 2024. The adopted amendments clarified the requirements based on stakeholder feedback and removed obsolete language. And there's a link to the agency response to public comment and a reminder that while the revised rules applied to all students enrolled at the time the amendments were adopted, rather than to a specific cohort, there was no requirement to update the IEP for students who entered grade 9 prior to the 2024-25 school year. And then on our next slide, we see question 1.3 in the same section describes the difference between subsections B1 and B2 in 19 TAC section 891070. And subsection B1 states that a student who receives special education services may graduate and be awarded a diploma if the student meets the same expectations for graduation as students without disabilities, while subsection B2 clarifies that an ARD committee has determined that satisfactory performance beyond what would otherwise be required in subsections B1 and D of this section on the required end of course or EOC assessment instruments is not required for graduation. And then additionally, we see the reference to subsection D, which states that a student in grade 11 or 12 who has failed to achieve satisfactory performance on no more than 2 state assessments would be eligible to graduate under the first condition described in 19 TAC section 891070 B1. So we get a bit of clarification there. And if that language about failing no more than 2 EOC assessment instruments, if that language is familiar to you and sounds like the individual graduation committee or IGC, note that a student's ARD committee determines whether a student is required to achieve satisfactory performance on an end of course assessment instrument. And we see the TAC, that section specifying that a student receiving special education services is not subject to the requirements for individual graduation committee or IGC. All right, on the next slide, we're moving into section 2, where we see questions related to curriculum and assessment. And question 2.1 asks, what the ARD committee should consider when determining whether the curriculum as modified is sufficiently rigorous for a student to earn an endorsement. And this term, sufficiently rigorous, is found in section 891070 subsection C, which defines how a student receiving special education services may earn an endorsement under 19 TAC section 7413. So the response to this question clarifies that the interpretation of sufficiently rigorous curriculum is outside the scope of rulemaking and guidance. However, there are some considerations included in the response that may be helpful for ARD committees when determining whether to award an endorsement for a student who received modified content in one or more courses. And you can see the 3 questions to consider, such as which content areas did the student require modified curriculum, and what types of modifications were needed, and what other information is available about the student's academic access. All right, and then our last question that we will review during today's webinar also comes from section 2, and this one is important to highlight today because it reflects a change to statute that resulted from legislation passed during the 89th Texas legislative session. Question 2.2 asks whether a student receiving special education services can earn a distinguished level of achievement. So prior to the passing of House Bill 2, there was nothing in statute or rule that specified options for ARD committees related to the distinguished level of achievement for a student who receives modified content. as had been available for ARD committees for considering the endorsement. And notice that Texas Education Code section 28.025 C7 and C8 were amended to specify requirements for students receiving special education services to earn the distinguished level of achievement, and that these requirements apply the same standards as for endorsements by requiring the student's ARD committee to determine if the curriculum required for the distinguished level of achievement, if modified, is sufficiently rigorous as modified to earn the distinguished level of achievement, and whether the student is required to achieve satisfactory performance on an EOC assessment to earn the distinguished level of achievement. So we have that recent clarification there. All right, so now that we've reviewed a couple of new resources, we're going to look at two resources that were recently updated, and we'll start with the data collection guidance for secondary transition. So we're going to move into our data collection guidance. There we go, and we can move to the back. The next slide, maybe. Let's see if that. There it is. Okay, thank you, Charlie. Back one slide. Uh-oh. There it is. Okay. While the guidance for finding evidence of secondary transition requirements in the IEP is unchanged, and I'll say that again, the guidance for finding evidence of secondary transition requirements in the IEP is unchanged. The data submission process for State Performance Plan Indicator 13 or SPPI 13 has changed. And the updated data collection guidance document includes a brief overview of the shift to reporting SPPI 13 data through the Special Education Data System, or SPEDS, summer submission in the Texas Student Data System, or TSDS, rather than through the TEAL application. And the data collection guidance document also includes a link to the SPPI 13 page on the TEA website for more resources related to data submission. And the focus of the resource that we're reviewing today is on data collection for SPPI 13. So I did want to be sure that we're to clarify that what we're focusing on today is data collection. However, within the data collection guidance document, you do have a brief overview of the data submission changes and a link for more information about the data submission requirements. All right, so on the next slide, you'll see that the data collection guidance document includes the checklist for SPPI 13, which has not changed from prior years. So those of you who are familiar with SPPI 13 are going to notice that the checklist itself has not changed. And as part of the shift to reporting through the SPEDS summer submission in TSDS, the SPPI 13 checklist can also be found in the data element reporting requirements. And page 11 of the updated data collection guidance document includes a list of the element IDs for each item in the SPPI 13 checklist. And you can find the checklist that you see on the screen on page 2 of the data collection guidance document. All right, and on our next slide, we'll see that each of the 8 items on the SPPI 13 checklist are addressed in the data collection guidance document. And as in prior years, there is guidance for each item and recommendations for LEAs to determine compliance when evaluating an IEP. So on the next slide, we'll see an example. So for example, item 8 on the SPPI 13 checklist asks, if appropriate, is there evidence that a representative of any participating agency was invited to the ARD committee meeting with the prior consent of the parent or student who has reached the age of majority? And the guidance for this item notes that a separate consent must be obtained from the parent or adult student before the LEA can invite a representative of any agency that is likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services to the ARD committee meeting. And there's also a reference to the gray letter from the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP. And there are several examples of what may constitute an invitation, and the clarification that while the documentation for agency invitation may be maintained according to local procedures, relevant information about inviting the agency should be included in IEP documentation. And on the next slide, you'll see that this item is a good example of the changes from the previous version of the data collection guidance document. While the guidance and the compliance determination have not changed, the formatting and design were revised to eliminate confusion. And so as you explore this updated resource, you will also find links to additional resources on page 12. And then on the next slide, you can see that for more information about the data submission, we've shifted back. We started this exploration talking about the data submission, and then we focused on the data collection guidance. And now we're closing out with just one more reminder that for more information about the data submission for SPPI 13, visit the TEA website at the link listed on the slide. And this link is also included in the data collection guidance document. And also, just one more thing to note, if you are watching, joining the live webinar or watching the recording, there is information about the SPED submission that was shared during the TEA Special Education webinar that was held on June 26, 2025. So if you can navigate through the webinars that were held previously, look for the one on June 26th if you'd like to know more about the SPED submission. All right, and that leads us to the final resource that we'll be sharing today, the updated Texas Transition and Employment Guide. So this guide is required by Texas Education Code section 29.0112, which specifies that the agency must update the Transition and Employment Guide at least once every 2 years. And the updated guide was published on August 1st, 2025, and is available in multiple languages to ensure that families across Texas can understand the statewide services and programs that assist in the transition to life beyond exit from public schools. And we will take a look at the updated guide in a moment, but first we will explore changes to the Texas SPED support page where you can find the guide. We'll look at that on the next slide. The first thing to note is that while the navigation on the page has changed significantly, the link to the page has not changed. So if you have that bookmarked or included in documents that you've created, or if you have that link saved, the link has not changed. However, the navigation has changed. And you have this link to the page where the Texas Transition and Employment Guide is housed. You have the link on the agenda for today's webinar. And by reaction, for those who are joining the live webinar today, using the reaction feature, let me know if you are able to access the Texas Transition and Employment page on the Texas SPED support website, if you have that open in another tab, or if you were able to use that link. And I'm seeing some thumbs up and some hearts. So it looks like folks have been able to click that link to navigate to that page on the Texas SPED support website. So once you land on the page, you can find the link to the PDF of the Texas Transition and Employment Guide in each of the 5 languages just below the image of the updated guide. And on the left side menu, you can find links to related resources, and we will review a few of those now, and you can explore the page on your own to find which resources help you support transition planning in your role. And also note that as new resources are developed, they will be added to the page, and you'll be able to use that left side navigation to find and access the new resources as they're developed. All right, so on the next slide, we'll see that the first section after the list of download options is LEA requirements. And here we see the reference to Texas Education Code section 29.0112, which requires that each LEA must ensure the updated Texas Transition and Employment Guide is available on the LEA website in both English and Spanish at a minimum. Certainly, there's a recommendation for posting. You can certainly post a link to the page where that is housed. Additionally, you can, beyond posting the guide in both English and Spanish at a minimum, you can post the link to the page where that's housed. You can post links or updated PDF to the other languages, but at a minimum, each LEA must post the guide in both English and Spanish. And the LEA can post links to the documents as posted on the Texas SPED support website or upload the PDF to the LEA website. And here's something important to note. While the page has not changed, the URL for the page has not changed, the URL for the individual PDFs in English and Spanish, and then in the other languages that are available, those have changed. So, so that's just something important to note in terms of our LEA requirements. And the next thing we see is that the LEA must provide written information. Oh, go back one slide. A lot to cover on the LEA requirements. While it's a brief bulleted list, I do want to be sure that that those who are joining today or watching the recording are able to pause and kind of consider the LEA requirements, given that this is the LEA webinar. All right, so another requirement, that second bullet, tells us that LEAs are required to provide written information and, if necessary, assistance to a student or parent regarding how to access the electronic version of the guide at the first meeting of the student's ARD committee at which transition is discussed, which we know in Texas must be no later than by the student's 14th birthday. And the first committee meeting at which transition is discussed that occurs after the date on which the guide is updated. So that's an important one. Now that we know that the updated guide was published on August 1st of 2025, that LEA requirement becomes also critical to consider as well. The first ARD committee meeting at which transition is discussed that occurs after the date on which the guide is updated. And then that last bullet tells us that on request, the LEA must provide a printed copy of the guide to a student or parent. So now we're ready for that next slide, where we're going to look at a resource that's included on the website, on that webpage for the Texas Transition and Employment Guide, under written information. And if you remember that left side menu, one of the links you can see is written information. If you click that link, it will take you to the section on the page that talks about written information. And if you click the card that looks like the one on your slide that says information about the Texas Transition and Employment Guide, that will take you to a page where you can find a resource to meet the requirement for written information that LEAs can consider using the resource linked that from the written information section of the page. So, so if you click that card from the Texas Transition and Employment page, you can you land on a page with the PDF document, and it is available in both English and Spanish. And this document describes how students and families might use the Texas Transition and Employment Guide to plan for adult life. And now finally, on our next slide, we're going to review what was updated in this guide. So you can see the table of contents on the screen with two new topics added: transportation and technology. Each of those topics get their own chapter, both very important parts of transition planning. And a section called Making Connections was added to the end of each chapter to list the related resources for that topic. And there's also a chapter called Making Connections that covers a variety of areas for transition planning. And it also asks the reader to go back into the different topics and look for the Making Connections section. So making sure to reference back to look at, where are the connections, what topics are critical for you right now in your transition planning, and what are the connections that you can make right now to resources. And so the Making Connections chapter covers a variety of areas for transition planning, and it also includes an action plan where readers can identify areas where some support may be needed, and they can list steps to take to connect with those resources. And the Taking Action chapter was previously called Next Steps. And so if you're familiar with the previous version of the Texas Transition and Employment Guide, you may be familiar with the chapter called Next Steps. So the Taking Action chapter still lists skills and activities by age band, but these lists were redesigned to enhance clarity and to promote easier navigation. And within each age band, there is also a reflection that models increased independence as the student ages and space for notes. And so that's our overview of the key changes, but I would encourage you to explore the Texas Transition and Employment Guide on your own to find new infographics, updated content, or to find the same helpful information that was available in the previous version. So with that, I am finished sharing new resources, and I just want to say thanks for letting me join today's webinar, Charlie, and thanks for joining those who joined the live version or watching the recording.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Did want to take a moment and I think we talked about briefly showcasing the back to school update. Is that okay if I pull that up?
It sounds great.
That can be found right here. Want to say anything more about this, Elizabeth?
Well, I think it's mostly important that those who joined the webinar live were on the website for the TEA special education webinars, and to receive the link to join the live webinar, you probably scrolled right over the link to the special education back to school update. And those who are watching the recorded version, to access the recording, you would also scroll right past the back to school update. And so this has just some updated information, kind of critical updates, legislative updates, as well as some other updates. And you will see, if you scroll to the last page, or I can't remember where, the resource that there it is, the new ARD committee responsibilities at the bottom of page 2, the resource that Lindsay shared today, that's included in there, and the reminder about the Texas Transition and Employment Guide is in there. So so just kind of some back to school updates. This would be a helpful resource to review if you haven't already.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We do have a little bit more time, and we have quite a few people on today, so I just want to hand it over to my colleague, Dana Garza.
Hi there, everyone. Before we closed out today, we wanted to double back around and make sure that all of our LEAs were able to access all of the information that was shared here today through our technical assistance teams. We recognize that it was an abundance of information, and we want to again share the link that it's provided in the question and answer will take you to this site that Charlie has been showing throughout the presentation today. This is where you registered to be here with us today, whether you are live or watching the recording. The agenda, you can click here and it will open up these different resources that can be found on the Texas SPED support site. But also wanted to highlight again, if you missed it in the beginning, the presentation deck with specific information related to the things that were discussed in depth today can also be found there. Also, in the beginning, we shared that on the Texas SPED support site, there is a new opportunities page where there are professional opportunities that may help some of our colleagues out in the field have access to various different initiatives that are available. So we did want to make sure if you missed that at the top of this webinar that you were still able to access that before we closed out. So back to you, Charlie.
And I'd really like to thank everyone that's in attendance today, and anyone who's watching the recording. And a special thank you to our panelists today for all the information provided. At this time, this concludes our September webinar. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording and end the meeting. Thank you and have a great day.